Ryan Clark stepped into the chat, looked directly at Shedeur Sanders, and by extension Deion Sanders, and basically said, "You're not that guy." He dressed it up with polished analyst talk. A little nuance here, a little football IQ there, but we all heard it. Maybe Shedeur isn't as polished as people think. Maybe the hype is too loud. Maybe it's entitlement, arrogance, overconfidence. Oh, really, Ryan? That's the angle you're taking? Because from where we're sitting, it doesn't look like analysis. It looks like projection, personal bias, and a little too much ESPN brain creeping in. The kind that only sees players in boxes and gets itchy when one doesn't fit neatly into the humble, quiet, wait your turn QB prototype.
If you're into the real story and all the messy twists they don't show on highlight reels, go ahead and subscribe. And if you're sticking around to see how this Browns QB chaos plays out, you should definitely be subscribed.
Let's be honest. Shedeur Sanders has done everything right. This is a kid who could have walked into college football with a spotlight the size of a stadium. Son of a Hall of Famer. National media magnet. Cameras following his every move. And yet, he's put his head down, worked harder than anyone, and delivered on the field. Not in flashy TikTok highlight reels. Not in press conferences. In games. In fourth quarters. Under pressure. Behind an O-line that looked like it was made of wet tissue paper half the time. And what did he do? Stayed calm. Stayed smart. Stayed locked in. But somehow, when it's him, that gets labeled as arrogance? Let me ask you something. If Shedeur looked a little different, came from a different background, had a different last name, would confidence be seen as cockiness? Would swagger be interpreted as a sense of entitlement? We know the answer, because what Ryan Clark is really doing, whether he realizes it or not, is weaponizing perception. He's not breaking down tape. He's breaking down narrative. And that narrative, it's biased. He's holding Shedeur to a different standard than other QBs with far less production, far more hype, and frankly, way more red flags. But somehow, Shedeur is the one who gets painted as a risk. Let's talk about the draft conversation for a second, because suddenly, everyone's shifting their tone. Shedeur's good, but he's not ready. He should have declared last year. He needs to prove more. Prove what exactly? That he can operate under pressure? He's done that. That he can read defenses? Also done. That he's a leader in the locker room? Done. That he can do it without a coddling system built around him? Bro, the man played behind one of the worst offensive lines in college football and still put up numbers. If that doesn't scream pro-ready grit, I don't know what does. So what is it? What's the real issue here? Is it that he's too media savvy? Is it that he's too comfortable under the spotlight? Is it that he knows his worth and refuses to let anyone discount it? Because let's be real, that makes a lot of people uncomfortable in this league. And Ryan Clark, instead of using his platform to uplift a young black quarterback who's navigating pressure, fame, legacy, and excellence, decided to echo the same old script that's been used to downplay players like Shedeur for years. That's not tough love. That's not critique. That's lazy. Let's not pretend Shedeur is just riding his dad's name, either. This kid has been grinding since day one. At Jackson State, he didn't walk in like a diva. He walked in and earned the trust of his teammates. He didn't take the FBS spotlight until he'd already proven what he could do in the HBCU ranks, dominating at a level where the media barely paid attention. But he kept showing up, and when he did transfer to Colorado, he didn't ask for the Heisman treatment. He just kept doing what he does. Play damn good football. And let's not get it twisted. Deion Sanders has never babied Shedeur. This is not a case of a father boosting his son into a role he hasn't earned. This is a coach who pushes his son harder than anyone else on that field. The expectations? Higher. The scrutiny? Louder. The margin for error? Smaller. And Shedeur hasn't flinched. You know what that is? That's not arrogance. That's resilience. That's poise. That's NFL starter energy. So while Ryan Clark wants to lean into he might not be as polished as people think, maybe the real story is Shedeur is more polished than the league is ready for, more composed than the media is used to, more prepared than the system wants to admit, more in control of his own story than the NFL likes from a rookie. Because here's the truth. Shedeur doesn't need the league to write his legacy. He's already built it. And with Deion by his side, you're not just drafting a quarterback. You're drafting a brand, a leader, and a blueprint for what the future of the position looks like. And that scares people. Because Shedeur doesn't shrink under pressure. He thrives in it. He's not just playing football. He's playing chess. And the league's not used to a 21-year-old being this strategic, this polished, and this fearless. So when Ryan Clark throws shade, you've got to wonder, is it really about Shedeur's game? Or is it about trying to humble a player who refuses to play small? Let's flip the narrative. Shedeur isn't shaky as a prospect. He's a top-tier quarterback who knows what he brings to the table. And while other young QBs get praised for grit and swagger, Shedeur gets criticized for having the same qualities, only with a little more polish, a little more camera presence, and a whole lot more pressure. The difference? He doesn't fold. He doesn't flinch. He just gets back under center and does the work. So instead of asking if Shedeur is ready for the league, maybe we should be asking, is the league ready for him? Because when draft day comes around and teams start looking past the noise, the projections, the hot takes, they're going to see a quarterback who's not just ready to play. He's ready to lead. So what do you think? Did Ryan Clark cross the line with his critique? Is Shedeur Sanders being unfairly scrutinized for being confident and prepared in ways that make people uncomfortable? Drop your thoughts in the comments. We want to hear from the real ones who can read between the lines. And if you want more unfiltered takes, football truth bombs, and real conversations about legacy, leadership, and the future of the game, hit that subscribe button. Because as long as they keep questioning Shedeur, we're going to keep reminding them he's already answered. Let's start with the obvious. Ryan Clark should know better. This isn't some talking head who's never strapped on pads in his life. Ryan Clark played the game. He knows what it's like to have your character dissected under a microscope by people who've never been in a locker room. He knows the pain of being doubted, dismissed, and defined by someone else's narrative. And yet, here he is, turning around and doing it to Shedeur. That's what makes it sting. It's one thing when anonymous scouts drop vague criticisms like questionable maturity or may not be pro-ready. That's been the NFL's go-to-dog whistle for decades. But when it comes from someone like Ryan Clark, who should understand what Shedeur is up against? Man, that's disappointing. Let's break down the critique itself. Shedeur Sanders is confident. Translation, he knows his worth, and that makes people nervous. He carries himself like he's already arrived. Translation, he doesn't shrink for the cameras, and the NFL likes rookies who keep their heads down. He may not be as polished as people think. Translation, we're moving the goalposts because we can't poke holes in his actual tape. See what's happening here? This is an analysis. This is narrative framing. It's the NFL's oldest trick in the book. When you can't criticize a player's production, you shift the conversation to intangibles. And Shedeur's biggest crime in this whole thing? He's too prepared. He's too good on the mic, too calm, under pressure, too comfortable with the spotlight. And the NFL, for all its glitz and glamour, doesn't actually like when players control their own narrative. They want rookies to be raw clay, to be shaped, marketed, and discovered by the system. But Shedeur, he's walking in as a finished product, not just on the field, but as a brand. That's not arrogance. That's strategy. That's survival. That's Deion Sanders 101. And it drives some people absolutely crazy. Now, let's talk about the double standard. How many quarterbacks before Shedeur have walked into the draft with swagger dripping from their pores? How many have been praised for their alpha presence, their leadership qualities, their command of the spotlight? Baker Mayfield planted a flag in the middle of a rival's field. He was called fiery. Johnny Manziel was out here flashing money signs mid-game. He was called electric. Joe Burrow lit a cigar after a national championship and got crowned Joe Cool. But Shedeur, he talks with calm confidence in interviews, carries himself like a professional, and suddenly it's arrogance. Suddenly it's entitlement. Suddenly Ryan Clark wants to question if he's polished. Why? You already know why. It's the same tired bias that black quarterbacks have been fighting for decades. Too confident? You're arrogant. Too quiet? You lack leadership. Too composed? You're cocky. Too raw? You're a project. It's a lose-lose game, and Shedeur is stuck right in the middle of it. But here's the difference. He's not playing that game. He's rewriting it. And you know who knows this better than anyone? Deion Sanders. This man has spent his entire career defying perception. They told him he was too flashy, too cocky, too much. He turned it into prime time. They said he couldn't coach. He's turned Colorado into a cultural juggernaut. So when he sees his son facing the same recycled narratives, you better believe it cuts deep. Not because Shedeur can't handle it. He absolutely can, but because it proves how little the system has changed. And that's why Ryan Clark's comments hit harder than they should. Because they're not just critiques. They're echoes of a bias that refuses to die. Let's get back to the field for a second. Because here's what nobody can take away from Shedeur. The tape. When the O-line collapsed, he stayed in the pocket. When the team was trailing, he marched them down the field. When the lights were brightest, he played as calm as football. That's not arrogance. That's NFL DNA. And yet, instead of celebrating it, instead of saying, wow, this kid has the poise of a 5-year veteran, Ryan Clark wants to question if he's ready. Ready for what? If he can handle that chaos in college. What exactly is the NFL going to throw at him that he hasn't already faced? Because let's be real, Shedeur's entire life has been pressure. Pressure to live up to the Sanders name. Pressure to validate his father's coaching. Pressure to perform in front of doubters, waiting for him to fail. And every single time, he's risen above it. That's not the sign of someone who's not polished. That's the sign of someone who's been sharpening his game, his mindset, and his legacy for years. And here's the part that nobody wants to admit. Shedeur's draft journey isn't just about him. It's about all of us watching. It's about how society handles young black athletes who refuse to play small. If Shedeur were meek, deferential, unsure of himself, the narrative would be flipped. Does he have the confidence to lead an NFL locker room? If he were wild, reckless, careless, different critique. Does he have maturity? But because he walks the line perfectly, calm, confident, composed, they still find a way to twist it. Too confident, too polished, too self-assured. Translation: we can't control the story. And that's the real issue here. Shedeur Sanders is not waiting for the NFL to crown him. He's not waiting for Ryan Clark to validate him. He's already built his own stage, his own platform, his own primetime part 2. And that terrifies the gatekeepers. So let's flip the script one last time. Instead of asking whether Shedeur is ready for the NFL, let's ask, is the NFL ready for Shedeur? Because this isn't a kid who's going to sit quietly, take the minimum spotlight, and nod politely while the lead defines his narrative. This is a quarterback who's going to walk into a locker room, command respect, and remind everyone that leadership isn't something you wait for. It's something you carry with you. And if Ryan Clark or anyone else wants to call that arrogance, fine. But history has a funny way of turning arrogance into confidence once the wins start piling up. Remember when Deion himself was called cocky? Guess what they call him now? A legend. And if Shedeur keeps on this path, you know what they'll call him too. Not entitled. Not arrogant. Just great. So here's the bottom line. Ryan Clark's comments weren't just wrong. They were short-sighted. They ignored the context, dismissed the resilience, and downplayed the reality of what Shedeur Sanders has already proven. The tape doesn't lie. The poise doesn't fade. And the narrative? That's already shifting, whether analysts like it or not. Because Shedeur isn't just another quarterback prospect. He's a test, a mirror, a challenge to the NFL to finally evolve past the tired cliches and biases that plagued this league for decades. And when draft day comes, somebody is going to take a chance on him. Not because of hype, not because of Deion, not because of narrative, but because Shedeur Sanders is that good. And when he proves it on Sundays, you better believe Ryan Clark's words will age like milk. Ryan Clark? He might think he's just keeping it real, but what he really did was hand the critics a loaded weapon and point it right at Shedeur. Here's the thing about being Deion Sanders' son. You don't get the luxury of anonymity. Most college QBs get to grow in the shadows. They get to make mistakes quietly, take their lumps in small stadiums, and figure out who they are before the world really notices. Shedeur? He's been under the microscope since the day he threw his first touchdown at Jackson State. The cameras were there. The critics were there. And the doubters? Oh, they never left. But instead of crumbling under that weight, what did he do? He delivered, week after week, game after game. Yet somehow, here comes Ryan Clark, a guy who should know the grind, the doubt, the process. And he reduces all that to, maybe he's not as polished as people think. Really? That's the analysis? That's the grand revelation? Because let's be honest, Shedeur isn't the one who looks unpolished here. Let's talk about polish for a second. Polish is staying calm while your offensive line collapses, and defenders are breathing down your neck. Polish is reading defenses, making adjustments, and delivering accurate throws under pressure. Polish is walking into a press conference after a brutal loss, and speaking with composure instead of excuses. Shedeur has done all of that, over and over. You know what isn't polish? Tearing down a 21-year-old on national platforms because he doesn't fit your definition of humble enough. Ryan Clark's critique doesn't hold water, and here's why. If Shedeur were truly arrogant, if he were truly entitled, his teammates wouldn't respect him the way they do. Coaches wouldn't ride with him. Fans wouldn't defend him. But everywhere Shedeur goes, he earns loyalty. And you don't get that by being arrogant. You get that by showing up, grinding, and proving you can be trusted under pressure. Here's the uncomfortable truth. What Ryan Clark really exposed wasn't Shedeur. It was himself. Because his comments fall right in line with a long, tired narrative we've seen in football forever. The one where confident young black quarterbacks get labeled as cocky, while their white counterparts get celebrated for swagger. Joe Burrow gets praised for walking with ice in his veins. Baker Mayfield was called fiery when he planted a flag on a rival's field. Johnny Manziel was a showman for flashing money signs mid-game. But Shedeur? He calmly points to his watch after leading a comeback win, and suddenly he's arrogant? He sits tall in interviews and speaks with clarity, and suddenly he's entitled? It's not critique. It's coding. And Ryan Clark just gave it legitimacy. And let's be real here. Shedeur has had to climb twice as high as most young QBs just to get the same recognition. At Jackson State, the narrative was, he's only succeeding because it's a SWAC. He moves to Colorado and immediately lights up Power 5 competition. And suddenly the narrative shifts. Well, he has his dad as coach, so of course he's comfortable. No matter what he does, there's always a but. And Ryan Clark just added another one. But is he really polished? At what point do we stop moving the goalposts? If Shedeur dominates in the NFL, and I believe he will, what's the next excuse going to be? Well, he only succeeded because his dad prepared him. Guess what? That's not an excuse. That's called development. That's called parenting. That's called doing the work. And it's exactly why Shedeur is more prepared than 90% of the quarterbacks who declared before him. Let's zoom out for a second. Ryan Clark's voice carries weight. He's on national TV. He's got credibility. People listen when he talks. And when he drops a critique like this, it doesn't just float away. It sticks. It shapes perception. Suddenly, draft analysts start echoing it. Fans start parroting it. Teams start questioning it. And now you've got a young quarterback battling not just offenses on the field, but narratives off it. Narratives that aren't based in fact, but in comfort. Because here's the truth. Shedeur makes people uncomfortable. Not because he's reckless. Not because he's immature. But because he's in control. And control is the one thing the NFL doesn't like rookies to have. You know who this reminds me of? His dad. Deion Sanders walked into the NFL with sunglasses, gold chains, and more confidence than anyone had ever seen. And what did people call him? Arrogant. Flashy. A distraction. Now, decades later, what do we call him? A legend. An icon. Prime time. What changed? Not Deion. He's always been the same. What changed was perception. Once he proved beyond a shadow of a doubt that his confidence wasn't arrogance. It was reality. Shedeur is walking that same path. And Ryan Clark, of all people, should have recognized it. Here's what makes me shake my head. Clark knows the NFL is transactional. He knows teams use media narratives as leverage in draft evaluations. He knows young players get labeled before they even step into a locker room. So why feed into that? Why hand the league a ready-made excuse to downplay Shedeur? Because that's exactly what's going to happen. Scouts are going to say, well, Ryan Clark did say he might be arrogant. Teams are going to whisper he may not be polished. And boom, the cycle continues. All because one analyst decided to chase a hot take instead of standing on truth. But let's set the record straight right here, right now. Shedeur Sanders isn't arrogant. He's prepared. He isn't entitled. He's earned it. He isn't unpolished. He's one of the most game-ready quarterbacks in the draft conversation. And when he finally hears his name called on draft night, that moment won't be about hype. It won't be about nepotism. It won't even be about legacy. It'll be about a young man who spent his whole life proving people wrong, proving that confidence doesn't equal arrogance, proving that polish doesn't mean entitlement, and proving that you can carry pressure like it's nothing because you've been built for it from day one. And when that happens, the Ryan Clarks of the world are going to have to eat their words, because the receipts will be there, the tape will be there, the wins will be there, and Shedeur, he'll be too busy leading a franchise to care. See, when you take a shot at Shedeur Sanders, you're not just critiquing a quarterback prospect. You're questioning a movement. You're poking at a player who represents more than just numbers on a stat sheet. Shedeur isn't just playing football. He's carrying the weight of expectations, legacy, culture, and a father who has reshaped the game at every single level he's touched. And that's why Clark's words sting the way they do. Because they don't land as simple commentary. They land as reinforcement of every tired, recycled narrative that black quarterbacks have had to fight against since the beginning of the league. Too cocky, too flashy, too confident, too polished. Notice how it's never just enough. But Shedeur, he's not here to fit into a box. He's here to break it. Let's not forget, this kid is operating with pressure most players can't even imagine. He's not only trying to prove himself, he's trying to prove that his father's belief in him is justified. Every time he steps on the field, it's not just about the scoreboard. It's about silencing critics who are waiting for him to stumble so they can scream nepotism. And yet, he doesn't stumble. He delivers, calmly, poised, professionally. That's not arrogance. That's survival. So when Ryan Clark paints it as overconfidence, it's not just wrong, it's dismissive. It takes a lifetime of preparation, discipline, and resilience and reduces it to attitude. And that's the part that burns. Because if we're keeping it real, Shedeur Sanders is more prepared than half the quarterbacks who've gone in the first round over the last decade. He's faced adversity head-on, behind a weak line in hostile stadiums, with the national spotlight roasting his every move, and still made the throws, still led the drives, still looked like a pro. What else does he have to do? The truth is nothing. The tape speaks. The leadership speaks. The poise speaks. But critics like Clark don't want to hear it, because it's easy to lean on narratives than to acknowledge that maybe, just maybe, Shedeur Sanders is about to change the way quarterbacks are evaluated forever. And that's why draft night is going to be so sweet. Because when Shedeur's name gets called, and when he walks onto that NFL stage with the same calm confidence that people love to call arrogance, it won't be Ryan Clark's voice people remember. It'll be Shedeur's game. And the game doesn't lie. So what do you think? Was Ryan Clark way out of line? Or was this just another example of the media trying to humble a confident young quarterback? Drop your take in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe, because if the critics keep coming for Shedeur, we'll be here every time, setting the record straight.